What I want to know is how does one get involved in doing rock work as a woman? Do you really, really want to know? Or do you just want the rehearsed response that I always give? What would happen if we chose to really tell the truth about ourselves? Like if we really, really just told the real truth of our lives. I'm not saying that it's true. I'm saying that it's my truth.
You're listening to Hammered.
Waking up every day, or shall I say coming to every day, because I usually passed out, was really a scary process. I remember I would get up and I would immediately go through my apartment and look for evidence of something bad, of course. I didn't know if I had driven myself home, if there was somebody there. Sometimes there would be someone there. There would be food packaging, a lot of times fast food packaging. Before I sold my motorcycle in a blackout to Wiki, I would often wake up in the mornings and there would be Waffle House boxes all over the kitchen. And I remember I would look at these food boxes and I could not figure out who had eaten all this food and how it got there. And then, of course, my flashbacks would start coming through my mind. It's like an 8mm film that's sort of flashing just scenes. And I would recall riding my motorcycle up to a Waffle House. And by then I was really getting bigger and bigger with my weight. And I had worn this trench coat to sort of cover myself because I was so embarrassed and so self-conscious. But I had worn this trench coat and I would have these flashbacks of going into a Waffle House, and I remember ordering food as if I was ordering it for like 3 or 4 people. And I would say things like, well, I think he wants the T-bone steak dinner and she wants a patty melt with scattered, smothered, and covered. And I would go down the list of what these people wanted. And then I would have these flashes of standing in the bathroom hallway, and there was this door with a small rectangular window, and I would look out of the window and watch them, the cooks, stack the Waffle House boxes on the counter. And it was like I knew how many I had ordered, I guess, in a blackout. Later in life, I found out that a blackout is basically you operating out of your subconscious mind. And your conscious mind is asleep, drunk, asleep. So my subconscious must stand there and watch the Waffle House boxes stack up and count them. And then I would have flashes of walking past as if I was going to leave, but I would reach over, grab those boxes of food and go out, and I had left my motorcycle running, and I would bungee cord these boxes on the back of the seat, jump on the motorcycle, and take off. I never got caught, and I guess I became the Waffle House bandit. I would never go back to the same Waffle House. But these mornings after were so terrifying because of the food and I couldn't understand what was happening to me, and my body was just changing pretty rapidly. And another thing I would do, I would actually have Wiki drive me around in Atlanta in my own car I would put a cooler of beer in my back seat. Now, this is a Toyota Corolla, so it's not a real big car. And I would put this cooler of beer, and I would have my music back in the back. I had like a boom box, and I would have her drive me around 285 at night, and she would go around and around and around 285. And I remember her saying, "Do you want me to go back now?" And I'd go, "No, keep driving." And I would listen to songs that would just break my soul and my heart wide open. And I would drink more and more. And it was so pathetic. And I remember one morning, Michael and a friend of his named Brooke, they had spent the night at my apartment. Apparently, they had brought me home. And I woke up and I was very sick, and I asked him what had happened. And he had taken me down to Tallulah's, where his mother worked at the women's bar. And I let him drive my car and just drop me off. And I told him to come get me later. Well, he said that when he returned, he went in the bar looking for me. And he went and found his mom, and they looked through the whole bar and they couldn't find me anywhere. And he said he drove into the back parking lot, and the car lights shined, and he saw these big feet sticking out from under a Jeep. And it was me. And he said I was passed out under a Jeep. And when he grabbed my ankles and pulled me out from under the Jeep, he said my head was right under one of the wheels. And I was clutching a bag of Crystal hamburgers. And he said I sat straight up and said, "Do y'all want a hamburger?" He said, "Jill, it was like you were wide awake." Of course, I don't remember any of this. So morning after morning, hearing these horrible tales. And then he said, driving home, I would play the same song over and over and over. And it was Madonna's. She had done a remake of Love Don't Live Here Anymore. You've abandoned me. Love don't live here anymore. And he said I would just play it, rewind it, and play it, rewind it, and play it. So unraveling was like a mild term as to what was happening. Things were not getting any better. I was getting sicker and sicker and sicker. Physically, mentally, spiritually, completely bankrupt. But there was always this thought of, I can get it together. I know I can pull it together. Well, that spring, I got a call from Ann from Texas. And she says, I'm coming back. And I'll be there the week before Memorial Day. So this was in May. And I remember thinking, oh my God, what am I going to do? Because throughout the year, she had called me. Sometimes she called me in the middle of the night. Sometimes she called me just periodically out of the blue. And I would paint this huge picture that I had this great place to live and I was doing great with my job and I had quit drinking. I'd lied my ass off about the drinking. So she was going to come back and we were going to try it again. Well, when she returned, I remember her looking at me kind of like, whoa. But she was okay. And she came in and she brought her bags, checked out the apartment, thought it was a nice place, and says, well, let's go out and let's go get pizza. And I said, okay. And I hadn't had anything to drink. But we went out to this pizza place and she ordered a pitcher of beer. And she poured herself beer and told me that I couldn't drink. She understood that, but that I could do cocaine. And after we got back to the apartment, she dumped out some cocaine and gave me a line. Well, this is like a nightmare because as an alcoholic, you can't just do cocaine and not drink. And so I did a few lines, and I started realizing I think she's addicted to Coke. Maybe the whole time she's been gone, she's been getting more addicted to cocaine, and I've been getting more addicted to alcohol. So here we are. We're just a match made in heaven. Well, she went to the bathroom, and I got up, and I had a bottle hidden in my kitchen. And I chugged that vodka, boy. I chugged it as fast as I could and came back in and sat down because she had already been drinking, so probably she couldn't smell alcohol in me. That was my theory. Well, a week went by. She'd been there about a week, and she was going to go play golf with her brother-in-law that Saturday morning, and she told me she'd be back to the apartment probably by 1. Well, Michael had come over, and we were going to go to the pool. That was going to be the Memorial Day thing. And Michael and I sat at the pool, and we waited, and I said, well, she'll be back in a little while. Well, she didn't show up, and we kept waiting and waiting. Finally, I said, you know what? Fuck it. I went up to the store. I got a styrofoam cooler and got a bunch of beer. Came back to the pool and started drinking. Well, he was worried because Michael didn't drink. And it was like he was like my keeper. But the sad part was, like, I guess I was replacing his mother because he had been taking care of her his entire life. Well, I got drunker and drunker. And I remember seeing Ann's 300ZX black tan interior sunroof turning into the apartment complex. And she drove very slowly up to the swimming pool area. And when she came up and saw me drinking, her face and her disgust was just very apparent. And she got up and she went up to the apartment. Well, I got in my car because I had driven down to the pool, and I went up there. I was going to confront her because she was so late. And we got into this really big argument. And she was in the apartment and apparently had already packed up her things. She was getting her things together. And I remember following her out the door, and I started crying, saying, don't leave. You did this to me. I wouldn't have drank if you hadn't lied, blah, blah, blah. I just remember little bits and pieces of that. Well, I slipped and I fell down 2 flights of steps. And I remember laying, and I remember seeing her car drive away. And that was all I remembered. And I woke up. It was probably around 3:20 in the morning because I remember seeing the clock after I crawled up these flights of steps, literally pulling myself up, got into the apartment. I think I probably broke my tailbone or my coccyx or something. Something horrible physically had happened. And so I just took a handful of Tylenol and tried to go to sleep. So I was in a lot of pain, and I was black and blue for weeks, and I just continued with the drinking. Well, now I had this routine that I would keep this little nail beside my bed on a nightstand. And I would always make sure that I had 4 or 5 beers left over, and I would put them down in the lettuce crisper drawer to sort of hide them from myself. But I always kept those for the morning, and I would wake up because I would come to after passing out, and my heart would feel like a freaking alarm clock beating out of my chest, and this anxiety would start taking me over. I would jump up, run in the kitchen, grab these beers, and I remember carrying them stacked on top of each other, kind of like a balancing act. And I don't know why that was humorous, but I would carry them all the way back to my nightstand, take this nail and puncture the bottom of the can and open the top of the beer can and shoot this beer down my throat. It's called shotgunning. Well, I would shotgun 4 or 5 beers as fast as I could, and this would be around 4 or 5 o'clock in the morning. Well, that would put me back to sleep. I had to be at work at 10 a.m., but it would give me enough time to go back to sleep, and then, of course, I'd wake up and be sick again, but I would have gotten a little more sleep. So this pattern went on, and summer came and went, and I was feeling so desperate and so alone and so sick. I was so embarrassed and ashamed of myself physically, and I just felt like I had just reached this place where I couldn't go on. Well, one day at work, I was standing back where the photo machine was, and for some reason, Allison wasn't there that day. I was there by myself. I had the radio on, and no customers were in there. It was just very quiet, and I'd been listening to the radio, and this commercial came on, and it said, "My name is Betty, and I'm an alcoholic." And then you heard an audience say, "Hi, Betty." And then it said, "Charter Peachford Hospital presents A Day with Betty Ford at Cobb Galleria Center. For tickets, call," and it said this phone number. Well, I grabbed a pen and I wrote this phone number down. And when I heard that, something inside of me came to life. I had chills. When I heard that woman's voice say, "My name is Betty, and I'm an alcoholic," and then I heard a group of people say, "Hi, Betty," it just went off in me. And I picked the phone up and I called this phone number. And I said, I would like to get 2 tickets. And it was going to be this day-long workshop kind of conference at Cobb Galleria Center. Well, I had an American Express card, and so I went ahead and ordered these tickets. I ordered 2 tickets, and they were very expensive. And I hung the phone up, and I got at the nerve, and I called my mother. And I said, "Mama," and I could tell she was real hesitant to talk to me. And I said, "I just bought 2 tickets to go see Betty Ford at the Cobb Galleria Center." And she went, "Oh?" And I said, "Yeah." I said, "Do you think that you would go with me?" And she said, "Yes." And so when the day came to go, I was going to have to miss work that day, and I had to tell Mohan, and of course, I had told Allison. Well, she was sort of making fun of me about the whole thing. And then saying, "Well, that's good, Curly, that's good, Curly, good for you, yeah. Because that's what's interesting about addiction, is that other addicts or other alcoholics will always support you to a degree unless it starts to threaten them. So she acted all like, "Yeah, you've been pretty out of control, and yeah, it'd probably be good for you to go do something like that." And so my mother and I, the day we went, I tried to dress decent, and we took our seats. We got there, and there were probably 1,000 women at this event. I had never in my life been in anything like this. It was like they all knew each other. All these women, they were all hugging and laughing and talking, and it's like they knew each other. And I thought, how do they all know each other? This is weird. And Mama and I just sat there like 2 scared rabbits. Well, beside me was this old lady, and she was very quiet, and she didn't say a whole lot. She was by herself. And I remember smelling the alcohol on her. And I felt sorry for her. Now, I hadn't had anything to drink that day because, you don't drink and go to Betty Ford, I guess. Well, she had. But I didn't judge her. I felt very sorry for her. Well, the day started, and there were all these different speakers. And they were talking to things that were just like, they were totally going into me like, yeah, yeah, yeah. Like I was understanding it. And what was crazy about this is all these women and all these walks of life, different colors, and I mean, they were beautiful and they were clean and they smelled good and they looked good and everybody looked like so put together and professional. I was totally in awe. But of course, I felt horrible about myself sitting there. But I started listening to this one lady named Janet Woltitz. And she had written a book about adult children of alcoholics. Well, I didn't really quite understand what that meant. But I kind of, I could identify with the stuff that she was talking about. And then there was another lady named Claudia Black. And she talked about, in the family, she talked about don't talk, don't trust, don't feel. And I started breaking out in a sweat because my mother was sitting beside me. And of course, I'm worrying about what my mother's thinking or feeling. I didn't want her to get upset. And then this Claudia Black lady started describing like delayed stress and emotional trauma. She talked about a child's denial process and looking good kids that have to look good. Well, that really, really went through me. And she started explaining the meaning of adult children of alcoholics. She spoke so openly about physical and sexual abuse and how that went hand in hand with addictive families. All of these things were just, it was almost like my head was going to explode. Well, the day went on and they did a whole series of marketing slides and how alcohol and marketing were so tricky and so subliminal, and it was so interesting. And then I felt like I was a victim of this, like I was one of these people that had gotten sucked in. Was I really ever going to make it out of this nightmare? And I saw a little glimmer of hope in these women. And at the end of the day, it was time for Betty Ford to come out. And she came out and she spoke for about an hour. And she told her story. She told her story about being drunk in the White House and taking pills and the entire thing. And it was pretty wild to listen to somebody who had been the first lady talk about so openly and so honest about what she had done and the shame. And she just talked about all the feelings that I'd been having. And so the seminar ended and Mama went on back to work. It ended maybe around 4. And I was going to go back to the shop to close down. And when I got there, Mohan was there and Allison was there. And I came in and they were like, so, how did it go? How was the Betty Ford thing? And sort of jokey about it. And I said, it was fine. And then they said, do you want to go get a beer? And I remember inside of my stomach, inside of my heart, inside of my soul, this horrible, horrible, horrible yes coming out of my mouth. And I went with them and I drank again. And I was hopeless and I was helpless. That was in the fall of 1985. Well, that began the downhill spiral. What I had thought had been a bad time in my life wasn't that bad. And these next months became some of the most horrible, nightmarish times of my entire life. I continued to drink to die. I really, really did not want to live anymore. And so it was just on and on and on. And I remember going into the mall, and it was sometime before December, maybe early December, around my birthday, December 9th. And I went into Zales, that jewelry place. And I remember buying this little pinky gold ring. It was kind of like a braided kind of ring, and put it on my pinky. And I don't know why in the hell I wanted that ring. But I remember thinking, I'm turning 24. Well, 24 was a very significant number because that had been my basketball number. And it was also the age that Brad, my neighbor, was when he died. And so I had this big dramatic thing around the number 24. And I really felt like I was going to die at 24. I was sort of planning it kind of on an unconscious level. Well, I got a letter in the mail out of the blue, and it was a letter from Anne. And she had moved to Virginia. Apparently her parents had moved to Virginia, and now they had all become religious. And she told me how beautiful it was, and the rolling hills, and how nice the nature and everything. And she said, I wish I would have met you now in my life. And she was going to come to Atlanta New Year's. She wanted to see me and talk to me. Well, that was like some sort of like, oh, this is the answer. This is the answer. She's coming. She wants to talk to me. Oh my God. She's going to tell me that she loves me and that she's going to help me and it's going to be okay and she's going to save me. And so I started kind of trying to prepare myself. Well, Christmas was rolling around again, and Michael and I did a tree again with his mother's stolen ornaments. And then I had this little get together, and a bunch of the people came from the bar a mile away. It was like a drunken, just a horrible, I won't even call it a party. But Terry, my friend that had lived in my dad's apartments, she had really started getting out of control with her drinking. And she was at this party. And she really, really got out of control. I remember her flashing herself, taking her shirt off, just being like real crazy. And I remember thinking, oh man, I got to quit hanging out with her. I would judge so many people like with their behavior. Before I would go into blackout, I could think that I was still holding it together and I hadn't had any outburst yet. But I remember thinking, I got to quit hanging with her. And so the days were counting down. And it was time for Anne to come to visit me. And it was New Year's Eve, and she was going to be at my house at 8 o'clock. So we were closing down the shop, and Mohan and Allison were like, hey, why don't you just come down and have one drink? And Allison knew the whole story, of course. She knew the whole history of me and Anne and this love saga. And she's like, oh, come on, Curly. We won't let you have more than one. Come on, just have one drink. And I said, no. I go, I've got to be there, and I can't be drunk. And she said, oh, we won't let you get drunk. Come on. And so they kept nagging at me, sort of laughing. And I closed down. They went on. And instead of going home, I thought, well, I'll just go in there and have one just to take the edge off, the nervousness. And when I walked in, they had ordered me a salty dog, which is a vodka grapefruit with salt around the rim, where there were 4 of them because it was a happy hour, 4 for 1. Who in the fuck gives a 4 for 1? Well, they did in the 80s. And I walked in and they both started laughing their head off, even Mohan. They were, oh, it's one, that's one drink, 4 for 1. And it was like this silly little joke. Well, these salty dogs were like in tea glass size. So, of course, I gulped one down. And before you know it, I've drank all of them. And I looked at my watch. I go, I got to go. And it was about 20 till 8. Well, instead of going home, I ran over to the Winn-Dixie and I bought wine and champagne because it's New Year's Eve. And, Anne may want to have a glass of champagne because it's New Year's Eve, right? I get home. I make it there. Get inside, put the stuff in the fridge, and I hear a knock on the door. Very light knock on the door. And when I opened the door, I'll never forget how she looked at me. It was as if she barely recognized me. I think it shocked her. Because by then, I was probably up to about 325 pounds. I was very sick. I looked kind of like I was pregnant because my spleen and my liver were so enlarged. She came on in reluctantly, I could tell, and I offered her something to drink, and she said no. And she sat in a chair, and I started playing Stevie Nicks. It was always Stevie Nicks or something, from the past. And she sat and she just watched me, and I was talking. I don't remember what I was talking about. And then I started crying and I started telling her, look what you did to me. Look what you've done to me. And she just shook her head and she said, Jill, you're pitiful. Jill, you're pitiful. Now, she had gone on and kind of straightened up her act and gotten off the cocaine and stopped drinking a little bit. She said she would drink, here and there. And that was always confusing to me because what I had been learning and reading was that it's all or none. You either quit or you don't. But the denial system will always have a loophole. But this Jill, you're pitiful struck a chord in me, and I started begging her, don't leave me. When she stood up and she started to go, and I literally crawled and grabbed her ankles and held on to her ankles, and she started trying to walk and dragging me. She was having to get away from me, and I was begging, please don't leave. I'm going to die. I'm going to kill myself. Don't leave. And she went out the door and she left. And I got on the phone and I called Michael, crying and screaming. And I said, Michael, I said, if you don't come here, he says, I don't have a way to get over here. I don't have a way to get there, Jill. Mom's at work. I don't have a way. I don't have my car or anything. He goes, and you can't drive. Don't you drive? And I said, if you don't come here, I said, we're going to take my American Express card and we're going to go down to the fucking Atlanta airport and we're going to fly to Bermuda. And I'm going to drink myself to fucking death. I said, you're either going to go with me or I'm going to go by myself. And he was begging me. He was like, please, just Jill, just go to sleep. Please, I want you to be okay. And this poor kid, I look back on this and I think of what I did to him. The next thing I know, I hear pounding on my door. Just the loudest, woke me up out of a stupor. And I was on my couch and I smelled urine. And I looked down at my pants and I'd urinated all over myself and this couch. I had become that thing. I had become that monster that I thought that I would never become. And I got up and I staggered to the door. And when I opened the door, there were two very tall policemen, kind of like sheriff-looking men. And they said, "Ma'am, are you okay?" And I said, "Oh, yeah, I'm fine." And they said, "Well, we got a call that you might not be okay." And I said, "No, I'm fine. Are you sure?" And they just kept talking to me, and they were trying to see how if I was awake or what was going on with me. They asked me if I'd taken any drugs, and I said no. And so they left, and I remember calling Michael the next morning, and I tried to apologize to him. By then, if a phone rang in the morning, I would answer it with, "Whatever I did, I'm sorry." I wouldn't even say hello. I would just answer, "Whatever I did, I'm sorry. I know it was probably bad," because I knew that each night was going to bring some other terrorized nightmare fucking ordeal. That was New Year's Eve. Now we are in 1986. I had no idea how I was going to live into another year. I didn't have any hope. I didn't have anybody left. I had used everybody up. There was nobody else for me to call. There was nobody else to come to my rescue. I had really fucked it up this time.
Hammered is recorded and produced in the Blue Ridge Mountains of Asheville, North Carolina. It's narrated by Jill Haynie, produced by Maggie Briggs and Jill Haynie, and with sound design, editing, and music by Alexander Rodriguez. Our beautiful artwork was created by Lauren Caddick, and we'd like to send a special thanks out there to Minnie and Robin. You can check out our website, podcasthammered.com, and follow us on social media for updates.